Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I know we have people from all over, so I'm really excited. Thank you guys for joining our session. It's going to be a good one. Today, we're diving into how to maximize Microsoft 365's built-in security by creating a unified security ecosystem. You already have the tools. It's Entra ID, Intune, Defender, and Purview, but how do you make them work together effectively? So that's what we're going to break down today. I'm going to give everybody a minute to get settled in, and we're going to get started shortly. In the meantime, please feel free to say hello in the chat. Let us know your name and where you're joining from. As for me, my name is Kanisha, and I'm tuning in from the Irvine Trusted Tech Team office. So I'm really excited to talk about this today. It's a hot topic for sure. All right, here's our agenda today. We're going to start with how to build that unified security ecosystem with Microsoft 365 capabilities. We're going to move into the best practices for tailored proactive security measures. And then we're going to finish with how to get started so you guys know exactly what to do. So I'm going to kick it off by introducing you guys to everybody here today. So we have Afif Ahmad, he's the delivery manager here. We have Nico Wallace, technical sales manager, and we have John Ho, our account manager. So I'm going to pass the mic to them to let them introduce themselves and talk about their awesome experience.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Kanisha, thank you for those wonderful introductions. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in for our second webinar of 2025 here at Trusted Tech Team. My name is Afif Ahmad. I am the Professional Services Delivery Manager here at Trusted Tech Team. I know some of you may recognize me on a lot of our project engagements. I'm the head of the service delivery team here, managing the fulfillment of any type of technical engagements that you may have with us here, overseeing and working closely with all of our project managers, cloud architects, and engineers. Been in the IT space now for 10 years. Worked in various industries, from public education to corporate finance, and I'm a subject matter expert in modern work and endpoint management and security. I'll go ahead and pass it to my following co-host. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Nicholas Wallace. I am the technical sales manager here at Trusted Tech Team. I have operated as a principal architect here in the MSP space and the security sector for about 12 years. I am an SME inside of security, compliance, and infrastructure within the Microsoft ecosystem. So I'll be kind of giving out some key points and informations of what we've seen with our customers going forward, but I'll pass it along to John.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to meet everyone here. I'm John. I'm one of the dedicated account managers here at Trusted Tech Team. And I do actually see some familiar faces in the chat here. Shout out to Ken and Dave. How are you guys doing? I've been in the IT industry for about, say, 5 years now. I started off in the hardware side of things, working on motherboards and graphics cards, and eventually moved over and learned a lot about software with Microsoft. So I'm really excited for what we have here today.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This is going to be great. I'm going to pass it off to Afif to get us started.
All right, thank you. Yes, how to build a unified security ecosystem with Microsoft 365. Believe it or not, a lot of you may already have the tools to make this happen, right? And what are these tools? This is prerequisite is all the Microsoft enterprise licensing, right? So this is your business premiums, this is your E5s, your E3s. If you already have that and you're working with that and you're constantly working with tools like Entra ID, Intune, Defender, and Purview, you're pretty much near the finish line, right? Something that we've learned is a lot of organizations are just not using them effectively, right? And one thing that I want to say is just because you have the licensing doesn't mean that you have everything configured properly, right? So if you're here on this webinar, thank you for tuning in, because as your Microsoft Cloud Solutions partner, we are excited to pretty much get you started on that right path and see what we can offer you as far as solutions. Why this matters, right? So this is huge. It's no joke that cyber threats are getting more sophisticated than ever, right? They're evolving. Ransomware is rapid. People are getting phished left and right on a personal level and on a professional level, right? Some of the statistics that are up here are quite frightening, right? But I do believe that as an organization, we should all be doing our due diligence to protect our users, right? Making sure that whatever infrastructure that we have, that we're able to protect the organization's devices, user identities, and more importantly, data, right? And that's kind of what we'll be emphasizing a lot about today, right? So how do we get started? Why this matters? Well, a lot of you are tuning in because you are active Microsoft 365 users, right? You guys have that sophisticated organization infrastructure set up. Now it's just pretty much doing those finishing touches and making sure that everything is configured correctly.
All right, so let's get started. So the Unified Security Framework. So as Afif touched on, there are plenty of tools in the ecosystem that you guys can be using at your disposal. So the way I like to break this down, especially when we're talking about M365, we'll get into Azure a little bit later. I like to call it my house. Where Entra and Intune are my foundational pieces for proactive security. And then I'm able to layer things on like Defender and Purview and any other features that I would really like to use within those suites of tools after I've developed my foundation. So Entra would be identity and access management. Intune is my structure. That's my securing of devices and endpoints. Defender is my video cameras, my security system, and then my Purview is like my watchdogs. These are going to alert me to up and coming threats that that really I don't have internally or externally. So moving on, every one of these we need to develop in a zero trust mentality. So things like least privilege, multi-factor, we want to assume potential breach of all our users and devices. So yeah, it's super important to develop what we know as Entra. So when it comes to the first piece of here, laying the foundation down, it would be Entra ID, also formerly known as Azure AD. So if you guys may get a little confused and mixed around, but it is now formally is now known as Entra ID, and this is where we're going to secure all of our identities. Our identities, the way we do that is we use single sign-on, we use conditional access, we use multi-factor. This is going to be the one-stop shop for all my identities. So if I'm doing something like hybrid syncing or where I'm routing all of my on-premise identities up to Entra, I'm going to secure them with something like a single sign-on. So I want to then establish all my enterprise applications with something like a UPN. Also, I want to do something like conditional access. So when we're logging in from a multitude of different locations or different products or different suites of tools, I'm using conditional access to go ahead and give them an action to perform to log into those resources. Another key point here that we want to configure is multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is done through conditional access, where we can pair it with things like risks, locations, and other places that other actions we can put around MFA and conditional access. So this is how we're going to secure our identities and lay our foundation for proactive security.
Yeah, and as Nico mentioned, there are a lot of features within the Entra ID suite, but there are definitely some risks when we are not using the Entra ID suite efficiently, right? So Entra ID is the backbone of identity security in Microsoft 365. However, we do consistently see customers experiencing security breaches due to either misconfigurations, lack of enforcement policies, or maybe just an incomplete adoption of Entra ID's security capabilities. So when Entra ID isn't properly configured here, it becomes an easy way for attackers to infiltrate your environment. So I'm curious, Nico, what are your experiences to tenants who have been breached through Entra ID?
So with tenants that have been breached with Entra ID, with tenants that have been breached with Entra ID, typically what I've seen that ends up happening is a user will get a phishing email or some type of social engineering, right? The easiest entryway for attackers is through the human element now. So that's why it's really essential for us to capitalize on using something like Entra for a secure identity management. And so what we've seen is attackers will enter in. There's no conditional access. There's no like least privilege, right? So they'll fish out for really important folks in your organization. So managers, directors, C-level, and then once they send out this phishing link, or maybe they do a credential harvest. From there, they have elevated access to your tenant, right? And if you haven't done proactive security and you haven't laid down the framework, they can move through your resources, through your OneDrive, your SharePoint, your Azure resources. This is a big problem for a lot of organizations today. We're talking about exfiltration, we're talking about sensitive information breaches, PII and PCI breaches. And so this is what I've seen what a lot of organizations truly do struggle with is They do all the AV, they do all the endpoint, they do all the 365 security, but they don't do the proactive needs that they need to do before even establishing a footprint in security.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear because we do see a lot of these real world breaches and we've seen them firsthand ourselves. And here at TTT, especially for myself, I'm very much more proactive than reactive to these responses. And so for those who have Entra ID all set up, you're confident with your configurations, your security posture, the question is, how do we test these systems to ensure they're doing their job properly, right? So we do recommend doing something called a pen test. If you guys have done it, some people do it on a year-to-year basis, maybe even once a quarter. But we do work with a partner, Hoodwink, that allows you to test your environment against simulated attack threats here.
All right. So yes, identity is important, right? That's pretty much the foundation of everything cloud and associated to systems and infrastructure. But what's secondary to that, right? It's the devices, right? Users are using the devices that are issued by the organization, right? This is where we as an organization need to make sure that one, that they're all compliant and corporate devices, right? And if they're BYOD, we have certain parameters to protect that, right? Securing the endpoints are going to be the most efficient way to pretty much do that, right? From Intune as your mobile device manager, this is where we can go ahead and enforce all of these compliant policies and make sure that we have the ability to sort out different devices associated by users and groups that are configured within Entra ID, right? So let me go ahead and break that down. If looking at the diagram that you see on the screen, I think it pretty much speaks in volumes, right? You have a device that's issued within Intune. It's associated with a group. That group will then get associated security policies within Defender for endpoint, right? So stay with me here. So this all starts with device enrollment and autopilot. So if you guys are familiar with Intune, you could do Windows autopilot. So this is the concept of zero-touch enrollment and drop shipping devices. If I'm going to go ahead and send Nancy a computer all the way in Florida, all she needs to do is just sign in. From that point on, with Entra ID, it will then capture all the certain attributes that are associated to her, her name, her department, her job title, et cetera, et cetera. And this is not just exclusive for the cloud, but it is also open to hybrid environments as well. From that point on, right, once we have all that established and their devices registered, now we can then go in and head and enforce all the baselines within the organization, right? What are security baselines? What type of device configuration profiles are we issuing to the devices? What kind of compliance policies are we issuing to the devices, right? From Intune as your mobile device manager, this is where you pretty much have that ease and automation in place. Gone are the days of GPOs where you pretty much have to make sure that everything is done by different task sequences and et cetera. Like now are the days where you have these dynamic groups, right? Where you can go ahead and effectively scope and assign applications, policies, et cetera, all within one unified platform, right? Which hence transitions to the next point that I would love to emphasize is conditional access, right? We talked about conditional access within Entra ID, but conditional access also applies on the device level as well, right? I talked a little bit about BYOD and corporate devices. Well, this is where conditional access comes into play. I have the ability to then scope and sort devices based on personal use, based on corporate use. Making that a little bit granular, I can segment it by departments and give everybody granular access depending on what they need, right? So for example, let's just say that personal devices, if anyone are using their personal iPhones or Android devices, I want to make sure that I go ahead and block as much access that I can. How am I able to do that? Those are going to be your app protection policies, right? So that's where that comes into play, and it's a lot more elaborate. And we can't manage users' personal devices, right? But however, we can manage their experience when they're entering the corporate environment of our organization. So that's pretty much going to be the emphasis of it, right? So we talk about AI and all and security. BYOAI is a thing, BYOD is a thing. We've got to make sure as an organization that we do our due diligence so we can accept these devices and users coming into the door, and this is how we do it.
Yeah, so the question here is, how do I achieve, Intune conditional access and get all these policies configured, right? So we have a case study here with Sensky. They are a laundry care and pest control company that has been rapidly growing in their employee count and managed devices, right? And one of their biggest pain points here was that they had nothing to manage or have any remote access for the user endpoints. And let's be honest, it becomes increasingly difficult to manage so many devices with such a small IT team. And I'm sure many of you can agree here. And this matters because one of the main concerns was that they did not have the capabilities to run automated updates or have a proper ticketing system for the devices. So what did Sensky do? Sensky reached out to Trusted Tech team and our professional services team, helped them set up autopilot through Intune for an automated updates and management. We also stood up security policies for their devices and endpoints. And lastly, we integrated NinjaOne, one of our third-party partners, for their internal ticketing system for their endpoints. And by the end of this engagement, we were able to essentially centralize their device management and streamline their automated update processes. This saved a lot of time when rolling out, and managing user devices on a day-to-day basis. So, Nico, I know you worked heavily with the Sensky team here, and you're one of the primary architects involved. Is there anything you want to add on your engagement with Sensky?
Oh yeah, I mean, we did a lot of work for Sensky. When I first originally met them back in, I think 2 years ago, we've had a really phenomenal partnership with them. They had about 200-ish, 250-ish users. They were a really small organization that just acquired their first company. And from there, they acquired, 6 more within the year after that. So they grew from 200 to about 1,500 within a year. So leveraging Intune Entra was a critical piece for them because they were, adopting laptops. They were bringing in infrastructure. We did a very good job to making sure they weren't accruing technological debt as they were going through their M&A process. So really, if you're looking to expand outside of the realms of security, obviously, which is always first and foremost, but as you expand your business and as you, then start acquiring other technological pieces, come talk to us, because realistically, what I can do for you is I can make that M&A or that expansion of your technology services here within the Microsoft ecosystem really seamless for you, to the point where most of your admins are going to be actually focused on things that they within the organization that they should truly be focused on, instead of provisioning devices, worrying about alerts and automations that are running in the background, licensing users, things that we find tedious and mundane on the day-to-day for as a sysadmin level, and then curing that headache for directors that you're able to sleep peacefully at night knowing that you have built-in secure processes that are allowing you to scale efficiently in your organization. So it was for Sensky, they were a perfect kind of testing ground for them, because we were able to establish a full cloud identity, and then we were able to do it securely. So that was the key points that I highlighted with Mike when I first got conversations with them, because they moved things over from G Suite, they were moving things from AWS, they needed to stand up a footprint in Azure. So these were the we had a lot of high-level strategic conversations about what that looked like and what that looked like in a scalable and a secure fashion. All right. So kind of tying off on that. So we talked a lot about Entra. We talked a lot about Intune. If you guys do have questions about those solutions, Afif is a wonderful expert when it comes to modern work and Intune. So throw those questions in the Q&A. He can answer anything I think you could throw at him. When it comes to Entra, you guys can talk to me. I have a background in infrastructure. And then now we're going to kind of tie off everything with Defender and compliance. So starting off with Defender, we now need that robust security system that I think all of you guys are dying to get your hands on. Defender has made waves in the past 2 years alone. I think right now on the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, we're at at least 2, or we're right underneath CrowdStrike. So they have dumped money into Defender, and realistically,
Definitely.
yeah, realistically, when it comes to Defender, there's five suites of tools that you really want to focus on. The first one, I'll kind of just start us off. Defender for Identity. This would be how you actively respond and manage your security for your on-premise. So this is your local AD, your forest, everything that you need to do there, your like domain admins, elevated privileges on local domains, and then also your cloud identities. So you can establish Defender for Identity to be a seamless, holistic experience to manage security on both your on-premise front and your cloud front. I'll let Afif kind of break into Defender for Cloud Apps too, because that aligns
Yeah,
right into the
definitely.
next point.
No, yeah, I mean, I think everyone has done an amazing job so far and pretty much explaining everything. Something that I definitely want to break down as well. If you look at this diagram here, it's so interesting how Defender has all these different segmented niches within the solution, right? So, one thing I definitely want to add before I continue, for all the IT professionals out there that spend a lot, just like Nico was mentioning in regards to technical debt, this is how I would definitely consolidate a lot of costs. Not only is that very efficient for you, but it's also very effective, right? Because you have everything under one platform. Something to think about. But yeah, definitely. When it comes to Defender for Cloud Apps, that's going to be all of your enterprise applications, your app registrations that live with an Entra ID, right? When we're creating these enterprise applications to do SSO and all these great features, believe it or not, there are some vulnerability and risks surrounding that. So with Defender for Cloud Apps, essentially you have the ability to monitor that information kind of going in from one platform to the next, right? User provisioning, login information, et cetera, et cetera. That is pretty much all housed within Defender for Cloud Apps and within that Defender Admin Center. Another pivot that I'm going to go ahead and transition to is Defender for Office 365, right? So this is going to be your communications, right? So Exchange primarily, but primarily how that really works is with emails, attachments, phishing, all the communication-based stuff. This is something that we mentioned in the very beginning when it comes to those cyber attacks, where these social hackers, right? That's what they like to be identified as. These are the tools where they're really leveraging, where they're gonna go ahead and do some phishing. They're gonna go ahead and have some malware hooked to some attachments. This is where we definitely need to emphasize a lot of that infrastructure and putting a lot of investment within our M365 environments. I'll let Nico kind of go ahead and talk about the next portion.
Yeah, I mean, also just tying off on a Defender for O365, there is a P2 SKU that is readily available for you. So if you are worried that your users are going to compromise your environment and potentially put you at risk, there is attack simulation and also training simulations, and then also trainings for end users built within that Defender for O365 P2 SKU. So definitely take a look into that, compare and contrast to things like KnowBe4. We have a couple of the partners that we also do, but look at what the content's available that's readily available in there for you guys, and just test it with your users. So it doesn't hurt to look and enable that service. But kind of jumping back into the Defender realm, we're also the fourth one would be Defender for Cloud. I know it gets kind of muddied up between Defender for Cloud and Defender for Cloud Apps. They are not the same. Defender for Cloud is more for your infrastructure. I'm talking if you have on-premise servers, you have AWS servers, you have Google GCP servers. So if you have infrastructure in a multitude of different places, also within Azure, you can also enable Defender for those, Defender for Endpoint for those services and workloads as well. What I want to highlight here is a lot of this Defender for Cloud is not a license. It is a subscription-based cost to the organization. So it's based on how long or how much uptime a device has and where we're protecting. So the way we do this here at Trusted Tech Team is we use something called Azure Arc. We establish this agent here on the devices that we want to tie into different environments. And then from there, we have line of sight or visibility within our Azure subscription. And then we're able to then apply protections to those workstations and those workloads. Come talk to us. We do implementations all this time because people are always looking at ways to protect their most critical workloads, such as their servers, their SQL backends, their front front ends for their applications, their Docker containers, you name it. We want to make sure that those are protected as well, as long with all your other Azure resources too, such as like your firewalls. We want to apply Defender for cloud to those resources as well, just to make sure that when we talk about something like a SIM or later down the line in this conversation, we have a holistic view of all the alerts coming from different places, and we can run some advanced querying and advanced hunting against that. Then I'll pass it back to Afif to talk about Defender for Endpoint. He would be the perfect person to kind of cap this off on.
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned with the MDM portion with Intune, Defender for Endpoint is definitely an essential piece of the whole security suite as well, right? We want to make sure that the endpoints that we're issuing within the organization are secured and registered, right? So this is what Defender for Endpoint allows us to do, right? So this is going to be your attack surface rules, your endpoint detection and response rules. To pretty much configure all of those, that's all within Intune, but all the monitoring, right? That's going to be within the Defender Admin Center itself, right? From that point on, we'll pretty much have all the special granular things that you'll see in all security tools pretty much today, right? Behavioral analytics, easy actions to remediate and block a ransomware, malware, all these little sub actions, pretty much blocking the device itself, right? But definitely another thing that I want to emphasize is when we're engaging with a lot of our clients, believe it or not, this is like an additional tool that they'll add to their technical spend, right? They'll usually have another SaaS tool leveraging like what the same function that endpoint security will do with Defender for Endpoint, right? And something that I want to definitely emphasize is if you're already leveraging the business premium license, the E3, the E5, this is where you pretty much have the ability to maximize your efficiency within the organization. We'd love to hop on an engagement with you to do some in-depth discovery consultation to pretty much give you the roadmap to have all alignment within industry standards and best practices. But yeah. Nico, I think we have a couple of testimonies or experiences with all these different type of engagements that I think that you've done one for Defender for Identity. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, I worked with a financial institution in the Midwest just recently, actually, where we did a Defender for Identity implementation. So just to give you guys a little context, they were using an MMSP, so a managed security partner, and they needed to attach a SIM, and they needed to collect logging and events and elevated privileges within their local AD, and they wanted to do that from the Defender portal. They didn't want to install another, expand their technical debt and also pay budget-wise a very expensive amount of money to collect a logging agent for their on-premise environment. So what I pivoted to, and I essentially solution developed for them, was adopting Defender for Identity. This included me going in and running a report on their local AD, pretty much getting all the identities cached into a log file, and then developing an agent, or not developing an agent, but deploying an agent to that server, which then seamlessly connected it to the cloud ecosystem. From there, I was able to manage and look at all my my jeopardized accounts, my high risk accounts, any of my domain admins that are currently elevated, any other elevated privileged accounts that had risky permissions. And then I was able to take those logs from the Defender suite and then pump them into their third-party SIM, which allowed their MSP to pretty much monitor the situation, keep them up to date on any potential threats happening with local Active Directory, and then help them sleep better at night. So this just helped them out a lot. This was a really good solution for them. They love it. It was included in their cost when they bought Microsoft E5s, Microsoft 365 E5s. So yeah, come talk to us. We can make workarounds, develop solutions. We are solutions agnostic in terms of when it comes to services. So we want to make sure that we're tying off on other products and things like that. I know we had some questions about SES1, but Afif, kind of doubling back, I know I talked a little bit about Defender for Cloud, and that's, I think, really pressing right now because people are adopting a really heavily based cloud infrastructure side of things. I know you've done some defense with some customers just recently for adopting what Defender for Cloud looks like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a local. What was really awesome about that project engagement is they were local here within Orange County in Irvine, but the whole premise of that project was not just Defender for Cloud itself, right? It was the whole Intune experience and the whole Defender experience in general, right? What was really awesome was about this engagement was how greenfield it is, right? You'd be surprised how many organizations, despite how being established they may be within SCCM or within traditional Active Directory, when it comes to the cloud, they're usually greenfield, right? That's usually an area where they might not have some expertise in, and this is where we come in, right, as your Microsoft solutions partner and go ahead and make things happen for you. But the whole idea of that project was one, moving from that on-premise Active Directory SCCM environment and going fully within Intune. So we did that successfully. We then translated all those GPOs, translated them into device configuration profiles, and made them device compliance policies as well. Not only did they remove a SaaS tool that was doing application deployment, they're leveraging Intune for the application deployment now too, which is fantastic. Leveraging the Intune Win files, doing the conversions from EXEs to the Win32 apps. We pretty much got their whole catalog within the cloud, and now they're constantly managing their endpoints and enrolling new users as the organization grows, which is fantastic. On a Defender security level, right? Not only were we able to get Defender for Endpoint, right, part of the whole zero touch enrolling devices starting from the very beginning, but we were also able to dive into the Defender for Identity piece as well, which was really exciting because they were still a hybrid environment. They still didn't want to let go of certain legacy applications that were running on certain servers and et cetera. But we now had the ability to monitor that information within Defender, which was fantastic. And the ability to now leverage Defender for Cloud Apps, I now gave them the permission to pretty much enable them to become experts within their own environments using the tools that they had accessible to them, right? So from that point on, they had all this elaborate, intricate configuration where users are in hybrid, but when they're leveraging full cloud, they have the full supervision of that, right? They're using applications like Adobe, DocuSign, et cetera. We then gave them the full enablement to become experts in their environments, which was very, very satisfying.
All right, thank you, Afif. So now we've talked a lot about Defender, talked about Intune, we talked about Trail. I'm going to tie this off with a nice neat little bow. We're going to talk about Purview. Purview is close and dear to my heart. I am a compliance officer here at Trusted Tech Team, so I have my certifications within identity protection and compliance from Microsoft themselves. So realistically, when we think about Purview, you want to break it down into a couple different methodologies. So we have a checklist in terms of talking about compliance. Realistically, first and foremost, I want to identify my data. So identification comes in me understanding what kind of potential risky information I have inside my environment. So I'm going to look for PII. I'm going to look for PCI. I'm going to look for social security numbers. I'm going to look for invoice numbers. I'm going to look for addresses. I'm going to look for anything that is going to put my organization at risk, right? So when we've done this at large scale, we developed something called a sensitive information type. This can be used in a lot of different fashions. So we have an exact data match set and sensitive information type where I can parse in a specific pattern that we're looking for, such as an invoice number or social security, right? They all follow the same numeric decimal pattern. Or I can do a seeded kind of machine learned pattern that we're able to seed a sample amount of data into Microsoft using SharePoint. And then from there, Microsoft machine learning, not AI, machine learning, will take a look at that information, generate a pattern, and then allow me to classify the rest of my data. So once I've identified all the potential risky information I have in my environment, and then I understand what's currently there and what's at risk, then I can go ahead and classify that data. What we can use with classification of that data is labeling. having a really strong emphasis in labeling autonomy. So automatic labeling, manual labeling, I always recommend going the automatic route because Microsoft machine learning is phenomenal after you've classified or you've identified what kind of information is living inside your tenant. It can go ahead and apply a labeling taxonomy to those documents. And what labeling allows me to do is now to start protecting that data. Once I'm protecting that data, something with DLPs, I can now apply protection policies or actionable events to those specific labels. For example, if I have a confidential label, right, I want to apply a set amount of restrictions to that label. I want to make sure only specific people can access that label. It cannot be locally downloaded onto the computer. It can't be copy and pasted. From the endpoint side, maybe I want to redact some information. Maybe social security numbers need to be redacted whenever it's openly locally onto the computer. Or I want to create a taxonomy that allows overrides. Maybe I'm HR and I want to exfiltrate this document for legal purposes, and I need an override. So I can build in administrator overrides for users to circumvent some of the protection policies when there's a justification for that. So we want to establish identification of the data, classification of that data, and then we want to protect that data. At the very end of this, right, when it comes to best practices with compliance, I want to manage the data that's in my tenant and the life cycle of that. So, for example, I have documents sitting in there that are 7+, maybe. I typically roll with 7 just because that's the tax year fall off. If you want to hold it in perpetuity, you can as well. But 7, I don't feel like when it comes to an organization, retaining data with sensitive information on it for over 7 years is just a necessary risk for an organization. So I always recommend cleansing that data or removing it from any active site, removing permissions from it, removing it into cold storage, putting it somewhere where I can put lock and key on it so that I don't have to worry about an attacker getting elevated privileges into an account, and then potentially finding a SharePoint site with extremely extreme confidential information on there. So maintaining retention policies and developing a robust data lifecycle management system inside of Purview is the key to success at the very end there. This is going to give you guys so much visibility within your tenant. It's such an important topic too. I think it even might deserve its own webinar when we talk about Purview and how it applies to different sectors and different verticals.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. When we talk about like defense companies that we do work with, when they get into GCC High, the suite of tools that is offered to them is much different than the suite of tools offered to commercial tenants. We need to talk about those things and what the critical impact are to your organization if you are getting a private cloud or a sovereign cloud with GCC High, come talk to us. We've done implementations for customers where we've deployed into Entra and the capacities that they're in for GCC High customers. So definitely come talk to us about this stuff. I would love to have a chat with you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Afif, Nico, for all that information. I mean, there's a lot going on here, and feel free to always ask us the questions, right? The question here now is, a lot of these features that we've talked about today are really available in the enterprise level licensing here, right? So that kind of begs the question of, what if I am working with a small business? You're still using the business suite, you're 300 users and below. Not to worry. So you can actually utilize these features, some of them natively Business Premium, but Microsoft has actually just recently announced a change where Business Premium users are now qualified or are able to add the E5 security license add-on. So this does increase the value of that license, and you guys can utilize these enterprise level security features for your smaller environments, right? Definitely super positive change from Microsoft, and something that a lot of people have been asking for. So I'm really glad that they've been able to push that through. So very budget conscious from Microsoft here. It's good that we're able to have that available as an option. All right, so for some actionable tips, as many of you know, security isn't one size fits all, right? So your industry, your compliance needs, and business model really dictate how you approach cybersecurity. So we do want to take the time here to kind of break down the best practices tailored for your organization. So covering industry compliances such as HIPAA in healthcare, SOX in finance, or NIST frameworks in the government, as well as zero trust principles. and actionable strategies to help strengthen your security posture. So many of the policies and recommendations that we're covering map directly to the security frameworks you're required to follow. So the question is, how do we actually implement these frameworks in your organization? That's where the best practices come in.
All right. Yeah, you're definitely correct in that, John. I mean, security is not one size fits all, but however, a lot of the foundational pieces kind of fits the same no matter what industry that you're in, right? Something that I'm going to go ahead and pivot and transition to talk about is the defender score, right? How to utilize that and what does that all mean, right? If you guys are leveraging a lot of the enterprise licensing, just like as John has been mentioning, this is something that I want you guys to do immediately. I want you guys to go to your Defender Admin Center like as soon as possible and to cross-reference where you're at in regards to your score. This pretty much gives you a very light litmus test of where you're at, what you need to be improving on, and what is on the roadmap for you to go ahead to work with your team, or even better, have us work with you, right? But essentially, with Defender, you have a secure score in place that allows you to know where you're at currently, right? Your current posture. The baseline score pretty much reflects what are the current security settings that are currently in place. And this is branched out to all different areas within M365, right? It's going to talk about identity security, which resides in Entra ID. It's going to talk about device protection and endpoint, which is Intune and Defender for Endpoint. It's going to talk about threat protection. That's everything within Defender for O365. And it's going to more importantly talk about information protection, right? So this is that data governance piece that Nico was talking about, that we definitely highly suggest that you go ahead and make sure that is secure. But ultimately, within the Defender portal, Microsoft has pretty much gamified this whole security game for you, right? Very proud to say it, but a lot of our cloud architects here, we're like experts in this, right? And we see something like a 47% score, our eyes go big and we're like, ooh, we could definitely get that up. But essentially, right, within the Defender Admin Center, what you'll see here in that image on the screen is top improvement actions. Well, believe it or not, you actually have the ability to go into your improvement actions and see the whole list of what you need to do to make sure to get that score. Let's just say, for example, to a 47.23%, all the way up to an 80%. And why is that important, right? It really is important because believe it or not, when we're talking about compliance, when we're talking about cybersecurity insurance, when we're just talking about security in general, right? This gives outsiders looking into your organization, or even looking inside your own homes, the kind of what you're pretty much working with, right? What I definitely want to talk about here is anyone has the ability to do it. How I would pretty much break that down is prioritize on what security improvements are associated best within the organization. So for example, if you're not leveraging a mobile device manager, I'd start with that first and foremost. Make sure those devices are in Intune, right? Let's just say, for example, if you're leveraging a different identity provider, such as Okta or OneLogin, well, maybe we should kind of consolidate everything under one ecosystem, perform a migration of sorts, right? At that point, I would then review everything associated with data governance, right? As Nico was talking about compliance, compliance is huge, right? This is where we're pretty much in the age of AI now, where your data is probably the most sensitive information within your organization, right? Believe it or not, some of your users within your organization right now are probably inputting the company documents and files within ChatGPT, and who knows where that goes after that. With data governance, you have that ability to protect that, right? Using those labels and everything that Nico was able to break down a lot more in depth. But, right, more importantly, what's awesome about this is as you make these steady improvements, your score increases, which I think is very encouraging. But yeah, I mean, when we talk about professional services engagements and the type of project engagements that we do with our clients, something that we really pride ourselves in is getting them engaged throughout this whole process, right? Very similar to like a training or professional development, I guess you could say. We really dive in with you to pretty much break it down for you, right? As we've been mentioning, no solutions cookie cutter, right? So there's going to be organizations that are going to be more HIPAA focused, that are going to be more FINRA focused, more PCII focused, right? And this is where within the secure score and your improvement actions, where it's pretty much segmented, but depending on the industry that you're in. When we're talking about the project engagements, I mean, more recently we worked with a organization that was local, which was awesome. But we were able to pretty much go on site with them, review their security posture, and their score wasn't so great. I mean, they were working with the 20% to kind of like begin with, but at the end of the engagement, we got them up to an 87% in regards to their secure score. We really dove into all of those different pieces that I was mentioning: identity, device, threat protection, information protection. Um, if you don't have the keys to make sure that everything is appropriate, have a conversation with us. I'd love to get that started with you.
All right. So now that Afif has highlighted some actionable tips, you guys can, and exactly where to find them and where you guys can, go and like just pretty much implement them today. Just low hanging fruit. Go look what that takes. Come talk to us. You get confused. We can definitely help you out there. Now I'm going to talk about the mentality or the method to the madness, right? So this is what we call zero trust. Zero trust is a framework. It's not a tool set, but it's something that you should adopt as a mindset. When you're talking about compliance security, you always want to adopt these privileges or just like this methodology here, right? So zero trust requires the principle of least privilege. So that means when it comes to identities, we want to verify the identity as much as possible. So these are the things with conditional access, identity protection, risk-based conditional access, MFA. It's something that I know, something that I have, and that's something that is something that's on me. So it's something that I have. So those are the two ways. Also, it could be a biometric, it could be a face, it could be an eye, it could be an audio cue, security key. Let us know. We can definitely develop different MFA protocols for different different types of objects. When it comes to principle of least privilege, this would be done with Entra ID and Intune. This is role-based access controls. This is device compliance policies, making sure devices are hybrid joined or full cloud joined before they access anything within our internal or external resources. Ensuring that we are using things like PIM and PAM, privileged identity management, within the higher versions of Entra P2 SKU to review and audit escalated privileges. For example, say I have a geofence around my organization. I do not allow X countries to log into my tenant. And say I have a pretty high level member in my organization traveling to those countries. I want to allow that user to continue to work, but in a secure fashion. So I will put them into a group and I will put PIM on that group. So what PIM will do is I can now set automated responses to say, to have me review this person's elevated privileges for a period of time and even revoke access after that period of time has lapsed. So that's how we do things like principle of least privilege, right? And then every time you create a role or a group or some type of security group, you're identifying the resources and the access that user definitively needs. You don't just walk around giving GA to everyone in your tenant just because it makes your life easier. You make sure that, you're only getting access to your certain organizational units resources. So develop with that mentality. You're going to want to assume breach. You want to assume every endpoint, every identity is currently compromised, and how are you going to detect when an attacker makes their move for the first time? From experience, attackers like to wait for organizations to go quiet. So this is on a holiday. This is on a long break. They know they're already in. They're just really waiting for the perfect time to go ahead and do their action, steal all your data or ransomware it. And then you want to protect it. You want really, really robust procedures when it comes to DLP, insider risk management. Most forms of attack come externally, but there is a slight chance for insider risk. This is internal. We're talking disgruntled employees, people with elevated privileges that have just left the organization. You name it, there are potential risks that are currently living inside of your environment, and we want to protect against that. And then kind of tying us off, so we talked about zero trust. Now we're going to talk about kind of just tying it off with a bow. So with identities, you have Defender for Identity and Microsoft Entra, your proactive and reactive suite. You have Defender for endpoint, and then also Intune for your endpoint defense. You have applications for Microsoft Defender for cloud, and then also Purview for your data and your applications. And then your infrastructure, you have things like Defender for cloud. You have Azure Sentinel. We have a ton of tools inside the ecosystem to enforce zero trust. So this is a continuous life cycle. So it's a constantly evolving process. You're always going to be, there's a new vulnerability, there's a new threat attaching itself to the landscape every single day. So establishing these policies and this framework is critical for you guys to identifying risk and staying ahead of the curve, right? Because you're only as good as your weakest link. But Afif, I'll let you tie off on a couple of different points too.
No, yeah, I love how you pretty much close that. But no, yeah, I mean, when we're talking about just everything that we've been kind of emphasizing in general, I think this image right here kind of puts everything together, right? So this is what I would say is your most perfect environment, right? This is like an environment that has the top premier licensing, and they're all about in regards to doing best practices and aligning with the industry standards. So here's the thing: you don't need all these pieces essentially. When you have a consultation with us, if you have an assessment with us, we'll be able to pretty much decipher what areas you need to have prioritization in, right? Because as John mentioned, not everything is cookie cutter. However, this is holistically the perfect picture, right? But definitely, I mean, what I would harp on in regards to what I believe is the most important, it's definitely going to be the identity piece, right? Because that is who you are in the organization, what your role is, and ties you all within the M365 apps that users would use, right? This is like SharePoint, Exchange, Teams, etc. At that point, I really need to emphasize in that conditional access piece, right? That's pretty much the front door, right? That's your bouncer outside of the club, where they have the ability to decipher, is this user in the right location, right? With geolocation conditional access policies. At that point, I would definitely emphasize the endpoint piece, right? Just like what I've kind of talked about on previous webinars when we're talking about AI and Copilot. What device are you using that on, right? That's your endpoints, right? These are your company issued devices. As an organization, we got to do our due diligence in regards to making sure that one, they're registered, they're compliant, and they're secured, right? From that point, if I'm the CTO, I'd feel comfortable and confident in regards to any of these potential threats and vulnerabilities that can occur within to my organization, right? Transitioning that over to Defender for Cloud, information protection, and cloud apps in general. Number one that I would definitely emphasize in is the information protection piece. That's going to be everything within Purview. That's everything in Compliance Center. We got to make sure that we perform and do practice data governance, right? Everything else I would consider a little bit more luxury items. However, it all depends, right? So I'd love to hop on an assessment and a consultation with you guys to pretty much align you with what the best practices would be for you.
All right, appreciate that rundown, Afif, Nicholas. You guys are phenomenal technical resources here at TTT. And now, like I said before, right? No, there's no one size fits all for all security solutions here. And while Microsoft, they do provide a powerful security ecosystem that's been vastly improved over the last few years, we also understand that Microsoft might not always be the right solution for you. So that's why we do work with these trusted partners, as you guys see here in this slide, to extend protections across endpoints, email security, and security awareness training. Our end goal is to be a one-stop shop for you here at Trusted Tech Team. So if you do want to see any free demos, or you have any questions on these solutions, please feel free to contact and reach out to your dedicated account manager, such as myself, or to your own dedicated account manager. And if you utilize these products and want to consolidate it with Trusted Tech, we can get you guys a quote and get you a competitive price here. And I know I mentioned this, kind of in the middle of the webinar here. I know that we have a good amount, for those who have a good amount of security tools and feel confident in your security postures, I do recommend doing a pen test. So that way you guys can get a litmus test for a simulated malicious actor. And it gives you an idea of how the tools that you already have stack up and highlight areas of improvement for your 2025 roadmap.
Of course, a couple of things I want to tie up on the third party side. Obviously, you guys do see a lot of partners here that we work extremely well with that are focused on the M365 side. But please come talk to us. We do have partners that do excel in the hybrid infrastructure space. I know Veeam is one of those partners. I do work heavily with Quarks. Quarks is a endpoint certificate, a ephemeral certificate. Platform for you to manage your Wi-Fi certificates or your encrypted certificates. Mimecast is a premier email security filter. We do have a KnowBe4 for end user training if you don't want to use that P2 SKU. Things like that, just come talk to us. We're really knowledgeable with these products as well. So what I said earlier is we've done deployments for things like NinjaOne as well, any other. So a lot of this is security focused, but we do have vendors for other solution sets as well.
Amazing. That was great. Thank you guys so much for sharing your expertise on Microsoft 365 capabilities. Remember, we do offer free Microsoft 365 security consultations where an engineer will actually jump on a discovery call with you and you can learn more about the environment. You can sign up by clicking the link on the slide. We're also going to choose 3 attendees from the consultation for a free Microsoft 365 assessment that's valued about $10,000. So we will take the time to take things one step further and actually present you with what you can improve on. We have 2 minutes for questions. You guys were amazing. I want to get to a couple at least. So speed round right now. We have one from Jose. How do you approach mobile application management implementation? We've seen pushback from end users as they have concerns about privacy.
I feel that's a few.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking mobile. So that's going to be MAM, right? That's going to reside in Intune. My answer to that, Jose, is if users are leveraging company data on personal devices, you definitely need to leverage app protection policies and mobile application management, right? That is going to be pretty much the prerequisite. I mean, from that point on, I would get in line with all the appropriate leaders within the organization and make sure that we communicate that, right? Because believe it or not, I talked about data governance. That's a vulnerability and a risk right there.
Awesome. I think this one would go to John, one from Kevin. For a budget-minded perspective, what would you consider as a bare bones or starting license for a majority of users?
Yeah, that's a great question,
That's
Kevin.
John.
So essentially, as I mentioned earlier, the business premium is a really good starting point, right? Business standard does not have too much regarding security, mainly for productivity apps, your email, your OneDrive, SharePoint. But when it comes to business premium, that's where you're able to get Entra ID P1 and Intune, as well as some of the EDR suite. And with the added value that Microsoft have recently done with the E5 security add-ons being available for these licenses, there's just so much packed into that license, and I do highly recommend if you're very security conscious and you guys want to make sure your environment is secure and ready to go, the business premium is a great place to start. Now, if you're more of the commercial enterprise level licenses and employee counts, I would do recommend starting with the Microsoft E3. That would be the starting point to build your security posture on.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everything. You guys were an amazing chat. My favorite by far, Anthony's little comment in there actually made me laugh out loud. So thank you guys for just being amazing. We are going to send you guys the recording after, and we'll reach out to anybody who's had some questions. Like I said, I'm so sorry you couldn't get to those. Feel free to reach out to us as well. Our panel knows everything there is to know about Microsoft 365 security. And don't forget, we have that consultation on screen for you guys, and that's where we will be choosing 3 of you guys for a free assessment to scope out a Microsoft 365 security project of
That's
your
amazing.
choosing.
That's
Yes.
amazing.
It's a
Our
very,
next
very good
webinar
document.
will follow up on April 22nd. It'll also be about Azure security. So that one's going to be a great one. Look out for that one. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys to the speakers. You guys are great.
Bye, guys.
Thank
Bye,
you, everyone.
everyone.
Take care.
Have a
Bye.
wonderful
Thank
rest of the
you.
week.